Welcome to this demonstration of Conemis Transition Cloud, or CTC for short. CTC has been built from the start as a cloud-native solution, and this way I can directly log in with my single sign-on user without having to download or install any specific software. Inside CTC, first of all, I can access all of the different projects that I have access to with my single sign-on user. In this case, we're going to the Demo 2D project. And inside that project, we have different tracks that represent parts of the project. For example, there's an assessment of Siebel instance, and the main part, that's a migration coming from Salesforce Sales Cloud to Financial Services Cloud. With the different stages here, we have development, UAT, and production. And for today, we're going to focus on the UAT part of the project. Clicking on that, I get a process overview of the main migration process, the ETL process, starting from an assessment of the source, extraction of the data, transformation and configuration of the mapping, optionally an assessment of the destination, and finally the loading of the data in the destination side. And I also get this as a compact view here on the left-hand side in case I need to switch back and forth between the different parts of the process. Now, typically, the project starts with the assessment of the source. So let's go into this part, where the question is always, what exactly do we have in the legacy application in terms of objects, in terms of fields, in terms of record counts? And the assessment component delivers just that with a click of a button. So there's just the connection that needs to be configured, and the assessment that is started with a button click, and then all the information that you're going to see is provided automatically by CTC, like the number of entities and fields, number of records, users, and so on. And for finding out what exactly is relevant for our migration, we have the list of objects here. Some of them have already been marked as relevant. And this is typically an iterative process together with the implementation team and the customer to find out which of the objects are relevant. For this, we can also drill into individual objects, like the account here, and see the fields that make up this object, together with a type, some more information. We have the relationships between objects to determine if there's anything connected to, in this case, the account that might need to be migrated as well. And this way, slowly, we define the scope, object by object. And each time it's possible to download reports on current state, either filtered by different criteria like the number of records or just the objects that have been marked as relevant so far. Customization can be included or excluded. But these reports are rather read-only reports, so they're not working document. The actual work is taking place inside the Conemis Transition Cloud, which acts as a single source of truth, thereby eliminating all kinds of version conflicts of lost information due to somebody not reading their emails, not integrating somebody's contribution. So all of this is in there, and it's not just for the scope definition, but it's also used for the next steps. So let's proceed here. These are the objects that we've marked as relevant for our demo scenario here. And this information is used for two steps. First of them is to generate extract definitions automatically for these relevant objects. And the second part is to update or pass on the data model into the mapping component so that it's available for mapping and for defining the transformation from the source data model into the destination side object model. Yeah, with that, we've already concluded the assessment part, and we can have a quick look at what we produced just now with the extract definitions. That's in the extract component, and everything that's here with a full extract demo prefix that's been generated automatically contains filters. If there are any defined by the systems, they're already in there. If not, they can be added to manually, or they can be added to manually also in addition to filters existing in the system. with the table name, the object name, the column list. In this case, it's just the relevant columns and some interface parameters. And these can be used directly as they are out of the box, or they can be refined to narrow down the scope in terms of the objects of the records. For example, cutting off by creation date is something that we oftentimes see. Once that's done, we can select the according extract definitions. In this case, we've prepared a set of extracts here for an account called Goliath, together with its attachments, contacts, goals, insurance policies, and opportunities. And we can fetch the data with just 2 clicks from Salesforce into the conemis Transition Cloud. Now, the next step is to define the transformation or the mapping. For this, we'll head over to the transformation part. And here on the left-hand side, we see the Salesforce objects, Salesforce Sales Cloud in this case. That's the source side. And if we take one of the source objects, we see the associated destination side object or objects. So it's also possible to split the data from one source object into several destination objects or vice versa. And underneath the destination side object, we have the field mapping, again, source left-hand side, destination right-hand side, with the option to map simply a field or a constant value, a constant text, or to use formulas to accommodate the more complex requirements that a transformation project might bring with it. This formula is based on the Excel formula syntax. So for everyone who's already worked with Excel, it's quite easy to achieve good results and quick results after just a bit of learning. Of course, there are some data migration specific extensions to the language that allow to do things like foreign key resolution, let's say translation of IDs between source and destination IDs, or conditional statements, or string manipulations, mathematical calculations. All that can be done with the formulas. And the formulas can also be used to put conditions on the execution of mappings. So if we don't want to bring over everything and can't filter for some reason in this source side, we can also add a formula here to limit the records, to filter the records that come to our destination. In our scenario, we have 2 specific objects, the goal and extending that the insurance policy, that are transferred from custom objects on the source side to prepackaged objects on the destination side. One of them is an older object that's a custom object, but again, prepackaged with a financial services package. And the insurance policy is a simple standard object that also comes with the financial services package. And this way, we can simply switch between standard and custom objects in a transparent manner. Both are treated the same, and transitioning from one to the other during migration is really easy, as we see. Now that we've defined the mapping, let's head back to our extracts and load them. And you will note that there's no handling of CSV files in a manual fashion, no downloading, while it's possible, but the data can directly be passed on into the loading component. We select the right connection here. We're going into the staging for Financial Services Cloud. Set a few parameters. So, for example, the number of threads, let's say the number of parallel threads that send data to the API, the batch size, the number of records that are sent in one request, concurrency mode to reduce locking issues. And when I click on Start, the conemis Transition Cloud automatically sorts the objects by their rank, by their dependencies. We'll start with the account and then work its way through the dependent objects. And what we see here is one central concept of the conemis Transition Cloud, that's the collaboration aspect. In this list, I see all the activities that have taken place over time on this instance. I can see what's been loaded, by whom, when this happened, and what the status was. And what this list does is to allow seamless handovers. So I could now stop working, hand over work to my colleague, and they could continue directly where left off. That's by waiting for the load to complete and the error message to appear, because of course we've prepared an error here that will allow to show the issue handling capabilities that we also built into conemis Transition Cloud. We see here the gradual progress through the objects. Most of them are green, and in a moment the opportunities will show a warning. That's to say something did not load successfully. To diagnose this, we can either use the traditional log files, but as you can imagine, these become rather unyieldy when we're talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of records. That's why we have the log statistics at our disposal here. It shows all the loads that have taken place, and in this case, we're especially interested in the opportunity load. We see, okay, this was one record, and it failed. It failed with a conversion error. More specifically with an LOV or pick list error. And down here we see that it was the opportunity type that has failed with a value of new business. So obviously this pick list value has not been mapped. To correct this, we head back to the transformation, select the opportunity, search for the correct field, that's the type, and go for the LOV translation. So we see the source values here on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we have slightly different set of values. So I need to select something manually. In case where we have matches, it's also possible to use the auto match functionality, either case sensitive or case insensitive, to get a match. And with that, we can head back. By the way, the auto mapping capabilities also work on a object and field level. So if there's a high degree of correspondence, it's very time-saving to just let the auto mapping do its work and then add all the things that need to be done manually. So heading back to the loading part now, we can retry the failed record. And the nice thing here is that we just have to retry this one. We don't have to resubmit the whole batch, but with the retry button here, it's as simple as clicking on the button, starting it again. And this will just resubmit this one opportunity without any redundant processing of records that have also been loaded successfully. And as we see now, the whole process has switched to success state. Quick look at the result in Salesforce Financial Services Cloud. We now have the account. It has contacts. It has the financial goals that we saw. So these are now standard objects coming from a custom object. These are now prepackaged objects. And the insurance policies, they are now standard objects coming from a custom object. We have notes and attachments down here, a picture, a text attachment, and we have an opportunity. That's the one that we just saw with an arrow that's now been loaded successfully. So this concludes the tour of the ETL process proper. The next part that I'd like to show you is the scheduling component that allows to create workflows from extracts to loads and to achieve things like synchronization. For example, if the customer wants to move users in groups to the new system, there will be a phase where users are working both on the source side and on the destination side. And of course, the work done on the source side, on the legacy system, should not be lost, but it should be synchronized to our destination. So in this way, I can define the workflow, add extract load tasks, add then first the extraction, then the load that we want to do, and schedule this on a regular basis so that it can run at predefined intervals and keep the destination side in sync. The good thing here is that it reuses the mapping configuration from the initial migration, which means that there's very little effort in setting up a synchronization on top of the migration. It's just what we saw here in this dialog. And the results will always be identical, no matter if the record has been migrated during the initial migration or synchronized later on during the sync phase. The mapping and therefore the resulting record and the destination will look the same. Another scenario where this is very useful is if we're working with systems under high load, where additional activities like extraction or loading would mean a degradation of the user experience of the users working in that system. And in this case, the synchronization or scheduling component can also be used to move workflows to non-working hours without a consultant or a user having to sit in front of the process and control and start the steps one by one. Instead, they can define the workflow, schedule it or start it manually in the evening, then go home and continue to work with the results of these extracts and loads in the next morning in the same manner as we've seen it with manually started jobs. The final part of the demonstration will now show the management perspective of the migration process. This is a program or project management perspective. And here I see all the projects that I'm responsible for. I can select one of them. We see the runtime of the different projects. We can select one of them, the grape ink, which has a similar scenario to what we just saw, with the Salesforce source, Salesforce test instance, and a Salesforce production instance. And on the right-hand side, I see the whole project history in terms of activities taken during the project, starting with the assessment in yellow, then extraction in green, mapping in orange, imports, let's say transformation plus loading in blue. And this already gives me a very good overview how things are running. All that information is provided without additional action by any user. It's gathered automatically whenever that action is taken in conemis Transition Cloud. And it's provided in real time, so there's no delay, as would be the case with traditional PowerPoint-based reports. So I can directly see how my project is running. I can see that this milestone, complete test loads, was a bit late, but obviously the team caught up, so they were in time for the go-live with a bit of aftercare work after the go-live, but not too much and not too long. And I can directly spot patterns that show irregular or activity that needs management attention. So for example, activity on the testing instance while the production runs are running is something that I want to look at. I can then expand this lane and I see that, okay, the activity has taken place on the event object. I'm drilling into that, I see the individual activities and can get information on each of them, see that in this case, okay, we just had 6 records that were updated in this activity. This way, I can quickly come from a high-level overview of the whole project into the details that interest me and that might trigger additional actions from my side as a project manager. In addition to this graphical view, we also have the more quantitative view in the control center. Again, these 3 connections here. We have the activity count compared to the planned number of activities of the processed records. And again, we can look into the details, into the connection itself. where we see the degree of completion for each of the objects, again compared to a predefined number of objects, of records that should be loaded, the absolute number of records, the throughput, number of activities, how these activities are distributed over the different types. And again, I can look one level deeper into the account, see the exact numbers of created, updated records, the ones with warnings, deleted ones. Again, the activity distribution, the progress of the object. And these two views together make it very easy for a manager to see what is happening in the project, how the real progress is, and to derive the necessary activities from that information, and all that more or less in real time. As soon as an activity is taken here in CTC, it's visible in project performance. That concludes our demonstration of the conemis Transition Cloud capabilities for today. Thank you very much for your attention and have a nice remaining day.